You're listening to the Armchair Cricket Podcast.
Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of the Armchair Cricket Podcast, a podcast focusing on Test cricket by armchair critics of the game. I'm your host Adit. Today, we have a really special guest, Aditya from the Fourth Seat Podcast, joining us. Hello, Aditya. Welcome to the Armchair Cricket Podcast.
Hi, good to be here.
It's always nice to have you as a guest. I enjoyed our chat the last time and our interactions in between. So, before we get into the nitty gritty, you guys have not had an episode in a while. What's up with that?
Yeah, so I think as with the rest of the world during the COVID times, I think we were readjusting to working from home and stuff like that. And also, very honestly, like a lack of topics and with cricket, basically everything else having taken a pause. It was like a neat little break in a sense from. Otherwise, we would have ended up talking about COVID on most of our episodes, which and just like fooling around also in these times was much harder. So we were all busy in our personal spaces for a while. So we are looking at resuming in a week or two now.
That's great news. Look, I was already missing my dose of trivia Indian niche movies and so on.
So we'll hopefully be back in a couple of weeks.
I mean, I must say, I thought of you guys about 15 days ago. I was showing my new roommates Gunda. And, you guys came to my mind.
I think we'll relaunch in time for the Tiranga Day.
Oh wow! Yes, of course.
15th August. Like it's very poetically the right time to resume with a rewatch of Tiranga, hopefully, to recharge our batteries. Yeah.
Perfect. On to slightly more serious topics. You are on the west coast of the US, aren't you?
The East Coast, yeah.
East Coast. How are things with respect to COVID there?
So, actually, the peak COVID situation here was a couple of months ago, and when New York was actually hit, and the numbers were pretty much the COVID numbers in the US were concentrated on the East Coast and like the bigger cities in the West Coast. But thankfully since say I would say late May, early June, the East Coast is actually okay now, especially the area where I live, the Northeast and the tri-state area of New York and New England region. We are doing okay now. Gradually started opening up in the towards the third phase of opening here, but the rest of the US isn't doing really good, sadly.
Right. What are the indications for the upcoming maybe month or so? I mean, it's a very broad.
It doesn't look very good right now, especially in belts like Florida and Arizona and these places where people are shying away from even wearing a mask. So it's that's one of the major reasons for this second outbreak. So.
Okay.
Hopefully people learn this month, and there is hope from Europe and also the way New York turned it around. So there is hope.
Indeed.
I see, and maybe we are not too far off from a vaccine, like a few months away from that. By the end of the year, hopefully.
Indeed. I don't know if through your academic contacts, maybe you know more than what we read in the papers.
So as of today, I think the Oxford study, actually they published their findings, and it looks like the results are good. They are promising. So if it all goes well with the trials, they are saying we are looking at least an October, November kind of a timeline. So
that's positive. Indeed.
Yeah. By December, January, we should surely have some sort of vaccine, and at least for the frontline workers and the essential workers, hopefully.
Them first, for sure. But okay, that's still very positive news, and I really hope, it's not a topic we want to talk too deeply into.
But it's not a topic you can avoid either, so I understand.
No, I was going towards certain personal beliefs of certain parts of the world and what they think about wearing the mask and so on. It's more of a political and constitutional sort of a thing that they consider.
It's also with issues like anti-science, anti-vaccine groups, and that's also an issue. Like Novak Djokovic, surprisingly,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have.
Yeah. In one of our previous episodes, I think Giri brought it up. He's a famous
Yeah.
anti-vaxxer. They organized a tournament, infecting many of the
Huh.
players.
Many of the players.
Silly. But anyhow.
The US Open was supposed to be on here. Veering back towards sport, that was one potential hopeful news, and they were actually looking at having partly filled stadiums, but at least the French Open is doing it, as far as I know. uh, they will have some element of crowd for the French Open in August, I guess, August or September.
Well, that's okay, but I don't know if it's any better than certain football leagues which use the crowd noise.
On crowd noise, yeah. But just like, if I'm not going on a tangent, what did you think of the crowd noise that the Sky Sports broadcast used?
Oh, are they? I'm not paying too much attention.
There is this mild hum.
Ah.
So what they're using is the day one ka Lords wala first session of a test match ka, there is this mild hum, right, where people are chirping and talking. They're using that as a background score without making it too jarring. So that's something I felt was good in this broadcast. Yeah.
Indeed. No, but that was a good touch, just to keep those tuned in, just to give them the sense of, look, this is like regular cricket.
Unlike Dubai's ka empty stadiums during Pakistan's home games, sadly.
That's a poignant thing to say, indeed, right? But anyway, I listen to Guerrilla Cricket, the alternative cricket radio commentators.
Yeah.
They always have this noise because they usually do it in their studios or at home, and this is no different from them, so it's easy.
Exactly.
So, okay, all right. Nonetheless, that's a good thought. Then they have also thought well about it, I would say. Well, if I were to talk quickly about our own, COVID situation here, it's sort of looking more and more positive. I dare say we have beaten the first wave, but we are all wary about the second one. The number of cases is less than 50 or 60 a day throughout the country, and the deaths are being registered in single digits every day, or what we see. So, at least it seems reasonable. But I mean, next month is the vacation month, right? August, where people should go with their families. And that's again something of a worry whether that will trigger a second wave. Here,
but how good are people with adhering to mask regulations and stuff like that? So are people doing okay with that in Europe?
Yes, I mean, I can comment about Netherlands in my part of Netherlands most importantly. So here, what I see is people, for example, it's not mandated to have a mask in all indoor spaces. What you have to maintain is the personal space. People more or less very strictly follow it. In certain shops, they request you to use hand gel before going in, or they suggest why don't you wear a mask before going in as a suggestion. Many people immediately follow it. And places like public transport and stuff, you have to use it, right? And people are very strict. You can't get on a bus without a mask.
That's positive.
And they follow it. And also where I see, for example, while jogging or while you just pass each other on the street or something, people are still able to give that 4 or 5 feet of distance between each other. And I consider that as a very positive thing. Yeah, it's a smaller population for sure, but I think they're a bit more, let's say, proactive in trying to not get, infected. That's, at least it seems a bit positive. When it comes to cricket, I'm very happy to say we have resumed the season. I've played 3 games already this season.
Oh, how is it going?
Well, we won 3 out of 3. There is no promotion or demotion. And our team sort of had a reversal in the last season, so we were very, keen to play, and we are very happy to start off. But the only thing, as I said, it's more of a chance to gel and get together as playing sports outdoors. Again, there are many rules. For example, you cannot use the, the comfort facilities. You have to get your own food and water. There are many rules, but not everything is easily adherable. Like, for example, you can leave the ball, your cap and sweater and stuff, you can give to a teammate. These things we still do. Some things are tougher, let me put it like that. But as much as possible, people are still, even on the cricket field, they're very aware. So that's something I see.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, let's just hope, it has to run its course. We know in 18 to 20, it took 2 years for it to run, I think, 3 courses right through the world. So if we have beaten the first wave, and if we can dampen the peak in the second one, I'm really hoping we'll do much better this time. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, onwards with the cricket, we have just witnessed the close of the second test match between England and West Indies. Aditya, did you watch most of it or listen to it maybe?
It's been like the game starts pretty early here, like 5 o'clock in the morning. It's almost like how an Australia Test match would be in India. It's exactly that time scale, timeline for me. Like what I've been doing, like the first test, I pretty much watched the whole of it. The second test, not as much because it was a busier week, but I've been catching up on the highlights because ECB seems to have a good highlights on YouTube itself. So they have a pretty good summary of the day. And so yesterday's game I watched, but the weekdays I couldn't catch this time. But I've pretty much kept in touch with the whole game. So I've really the first test was like the most I've been excited for a neutral game in a really long time.
Fantastic to hear that, and that's indeed how it should be. That test deserved all the fanfare.
And in a way, if you were to look at the positive side of it, I think given the amount of cricket that has been played over the past couple of years and non-stop just switching from one format to the other every other day, although we did take all of that for granted and we missed sport when it was away, it probably ended up like spicing up the sport in some ways. I think it might be a good reset button for the sport.
Yeah.
And one thing I saw was that the fast bowlers were all looking much sharper in the first test.
Indeed. No, that was indeed a very good observation. They all had longer hair and beards, but from a fitness perspective, they were indeed somebody like Shannon Gabriel. You could see the big difference, right?
Especially if you if I may go back to the first test, because you might have done an episode on that before. Yeah. So if particularly in the first test, one dismissal that really like struck me was that Ollie Pope's dismissal in the second innings. It's like fag end of the day. You have Alzari Joseph, Gabriel and Roche, all of them were bowling pretty quick for the final spell of the day, and that Pope dismissal was essentially like a boxer punch. Basically it's like a punch being landed, the ball cut in, he was forced onto the back foot and just played it on. So I think that was like a very symbolic dismissal, which was very physical in nature in more ways than one.
I think I mentioned this in the previous episode where we covered the first test. That's exactly what I said. It was more like a boxing knockout. Because he pegged him back, he kept bowling short and hard into the body and kept him sort of, as you say, tentative on his feet, and then one came all the way full and just crashed into the stumps. That was fantastic theatre, indeed, and Shannon Gabriel, deservedly was the man of the match in the first test. But somehow, if you come to the second one, he never turned up here. Wonder what happened.
Also looks like a fitness thing, right? Because it's back-to-back test matches. So one thing probably going fresh into the first game, it's an advantage. But then not having played any sort of competitive cricket over a period of few months, the rhythm in that sense and the fitness, so to carry on back to back for two tests, especially for a country like West Indies, might be much harder. England have a bigger pool to rotate from, as we saw in this test match. They had the luxury of resting both Anderson and Archer and Wood also, so they had essentially had a completely renewed pace attack. So it would have been interesting to see had England also carried on with the same pace attack, would we have seen the same effect with England?
Point, but look, there was one common factor, right, and a very important one at that. A certain Mr. Ben Stokes.
Yep,
he was up for it.
Yeah, and like from last year and this year, I think it's safe to say that you have your Kohlis and the Williamsons of the world and the Smiths of the world, but I think Stokes has a huge shot at claiming the title of the probably the most impactful cricketer of this generation.
Yes.
If he goes on this way in terms of the results and the games he influences, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, ever since he's made a comeback, this is a new cricketer altogether, right?
Yeah,
I think it was that wake-up call that he needed or something. Now he's performing to his full potential, and that's a altogether a different level at which he plays these days, by the looks of it. Coming back to the England innings, they were batting a bit slow, at least at the beginning, but then Dominic Sibley is old school test cricket opener, watching paint dry sort of a test match opener. But with him, Ben Stokes equally went to the same level and blocked his first 100 runs. He was so slow, but apparently West Indies were bowling well there. They had to be given the credit. The one guy who was missing really was Gabriel, right? I don't know if you saw it. He bowled a ball directly to the second slip.
Yeah. Very Harmison like.
Yes, and what he bowls it showed because Holder kept wringing his hands for the whole over after that.
But West Indies also like partly Gabriel when he came back in that spell, he actually got a nick and he was dropped. Sibley was dropped off by Holder, I guess. And at that point, England were only around 150 or something. So might have been a costly miss.
It was in the end, right? So if you look at it, that partnership took it away.
That partnership was just the meat of the innings. There was nothing on either side of it, actually.
I mean, Josh Butler 40, sure, but a little bit from Dom Best, that was more like declaration batting or whatever. That doesn't count too much, but you're absolutely right. That huge a partnership, given that they were 3 for 81, that could easily have been 4 for 120 and maybe 200 all out or something, right?
Exactly.
From there to take the score to 341, and more importantly, they took out literally one whole day's play. That's more important for me, I think. Because that point, the bowlers had to keep coming in. They had 4 full fast bowlers. You have Roach, you have Gabriel, Joseph, and Holder. Between them, they have bowled more than 100 overs, even 120 overs close to, right? That will have a telling effect.
The innings itself was very 90s like 2.5, 3 runs and over scoring, like 200 for 3 after a days of whole day's batting is not something you see very often these days.
Old school.
But again, to an extent, West Indies have to be given credit because unlike West Indies sides of the past who just unravel very quickly, they have kept at it. They have lost this test match, but at different stages of both test matches, it hasn't been like so. West Indies have won games in the recent past. Say they beat England at home, but those were performances where they just blew the opposition away. That was not like conventional test cricket in a sense. But what we have seen in this series, both in the first test and in this second defeat, is they have shown the ability to actually grind it out both with the bat and ball. Like with the ball, the first day could easily have been disastrous. After a dropped catch, Stokes could have gone berserk and last session could have yielded 120 runs. But none of that happened. So in a way, it's also credit to West Indies, given that despite that really big partnership, they kept it to 450, 460-ish score. It wasn't even 500 eventually.
Yeah.
So credit where it's due. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. We have to credit the coaching setup and the captain for the mindset that they instill into this team. There is this joie de vivre you see when the West Indian lineup plays. That is still there. That is intact. But to that, they have sort of allied this persistence and tenacity, which was probably missing all through the years.
Blackwood himself, right? Blackwood is much of a dasher otherwise, but at least you see that they have tried to play test cricket and give it the respect that it deserves. Unlike sides of the past where they would just come out and just slog their way out, but it's been slightly different approach wise. That's the heartening element for me, even more than the results.
And you're absolutely right. We were discussing it off air, right? This approach and this tenacity, if they continue, a full revival is not very far off. Again, they'll become unbeatable, both home and away, probably.
Yeah, because resource-wise, I think they're okay right now. I think they have the resource currently. In terms of the personnel, I think they have decent enough pool to play with. Yeah,
they would claim a couple more people. Yeah, maybe Shai Hope has probably the rope is over for him, I think.
Yeah, there is Hetmeyer, Pooran waiting outside.
Exactly.
They've not
and Bravo maybe he can fit in.
Yeah,
but what you can say, even in their first innings up until 240 for 4, they were looking really comfortable.
Yeah,
Then suddenly there was this brain fade of a half an hour where Blackwood was out for a grubber, Dowrich was out again, very well bowled by Broad, and Holder was dismissed by Oakes. These three difficulties, of course, Brathwaite.
And Broad again, like conjuring up inner Vakarionis like spell. Like Broad has these phases, right? Broad is a very temperamental bowler in that sense. So he can just go for runs and look very ineffective. Suddenly, then he'll turn up like one spell in a day where he'll pick 4 in a spell.
Exactly.
So it's very unlike an English bowler in many ways, but that is quite the way he just came back in that last spell. Everything turned in that one spell, right? Because
Yeah.
the entire test match was actually a matter of the West Indies playing out that one session,
Exactly.
which was very much within their grasps at that point. Nothing was happening. At that point, I actually told someone here that
Hmm.
it looks almost like a test match at Mohali at that point.
Right.
The wicket had slowed down significantly. There's nothing much happening. And Brooks, actually, as someone who I have been really impressed with in 3 of his innings now.
Hmm.
I think he looks like someone, if he can actually keep it up this way, I think there is a special test player in the making.
Definitely.
Very elegant of his pads, very Asian like
Hmm.
batting of his pads.
You know, this guy was supposed to be a much more promising as a youngster. You know, I was hearing this in the Sagaikor High Performance Center, Sagikor High Performance Center.
Mhm.
Uh, One of the guests on Guerrilla Cricket was talking about it. I think it was Toby Radford, who was formerly the Indian batting coach. He was also the guy who ran this Sagikor High Performance Test Center. And in those days, apparently Shamar Brooks was the captain of the team, which had your Shannon Gabriel, Jason Holden, all
Oh.
these people. So the talent was always there. What was probably missing was the application, as you say. And maybe he's turned now 31. He's not very young, but probably the maturity has come through. Now you can see indeed the talent is there. As you say that he looks very elegant playing on both sides of the wicket, off the front and off the back foot.
And again, especially against spin, like very easy and pleasing on the eye.
Indeed. And then he showed it in both the innings,
Yeah.
and that even though there were wickets falling around him, he hung on. His 68 was probably very crucial for the West Indies, even though they probably considered a lead that they wouldn't have, almost 180. It's a killer of a lead. But then, what do you say about this move? Stokes and Butler walking out to open for England.
Actually, brilliant move. Like very few sides do it these days. If I were to think of what India would have done, we would have opened with the same conventional opening batsman. We generally don't compromise on that.
Right.
So it's something very rare, and I was actually impressed. It didn't click. At least the Butler move didn't click, but the intentions were right.
Indeed.
Basically, it signaled that they didn't want to bat more than 20 overs.
Correct.
So.
And that was a T20, right? It was not even a one day. In their own mind, it was clearly a T20. And who better than Butler opens in T20s, right? Well, the test match, it's a different ball game for sure.
Something which really rankles me about Test cricket these days is sides bat on for too long generally, and they look for really big safety nets.
Right.
But at the same time, Test match batting sides have not really shown the ability to bat out day 4 and day 5 these days.
Right.
How many Test matches have we seen where sides have played out for a draw? It really doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Most Test matches 4 days are enough for a Test match result. We see that so often.
Same here.
It happened in both these Test matches, right? Last and this Test match. So I don't really understand. Test captains don't. I think played too safe. I think this was refreshing in that sense to see them.
It's probably the advent of the limited overs cricket that has made the batsman a bit more, shot friendly, when we use that term, right?
Yeah.
And bowlers are happy to bowl fuller. They know you're happy to play shots. They are also not going to sit back. They're going to try and make you play a shot and get you out. So, this is a longer argument. Maybe it's all leading towards a 4-day test eventually in a couple of years down the line.
Essentially, because if all we have to look at is the stats for how many test matches have gone into the only problem with a 4-day test, going on a tangent, is what happens when a day gets rained off.
Exactly.
That's a huge problem. You don't have the buffer anymore. Then will it eventually end up resulting in a lot more draws? Because Test cricket, I have ever since I started watching Test cricket, this is probably in the last 3 years. Test cricket has never been this exciting.
Agreed, totally. Same for me. I started in the unfortunate mid-90s, so to say.
Mid-90s.
Good God, I remember the roads, the 900 plus 700. Never, let's not go there. But at the end of the day, it's okay, right? I'd rather take a 4-day exciting test than a 5-day snooze fest.
Right? Snooze fest. Most sides also right now, you will not have a lot of lopsided games. Lopsided games in the sense that most sides can beat the other, at least in their homes. Even Sri Lanka, given their poor state right now, will still be hard to beat at home for someone like Australia, I would say.
Correct.
That so at least to that extent, you have a level playing field in Test cricket because you have more results.
This is a longer discussion point for sure. I'm not happy about that. There's a little bit of partisanship when it comes to preparation of pitches and so on. But
pitches, that I totally agree that there are more layers to it.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to say is that most sides have at least something going for them. You don't have like complete duds of a Test team currently.
Okay, in that case, that makes sense that we can, sort of also expect maybe if there is a chance of a closed dome, like a Telstar dome situation, then you can have 4 days of proper cricket where rain will not affect you, right? So if we can ally one to the other, that will make more sense. But let's see where it goes. But coming back to this test, they made a very enterprising declaration, 129 for 3. That meant, West Indies had about 85 overs to bat and 312 runs enough of a target. I think, that innings by Gordon Greenidge all those years ago still left a bit of a scar in the English psyche that they will not declare for 280. What if one of these guys go off? And then the test match is finished in 75 overs or whatever. So they will always want the cushion of 312. Of course, the bowling attack is vastly more experienced, but nonetheless, they began really well. I was expecting a bit more from Campbell. He flashed one at a half volley and he was out. That was very crucial for me. I was really hoping he kicks off like a Sehwag or somebody and he gets out
and Campbell largely has like I also have like a soft spot for Campbell. He looks like a decent opener. He looks like someone who beginnings is around kind of a batsman. I don't know why. It just gives me that feeling.
No, but in that case, let's hope, the West Indian management thinks the same like you. I really hope he gets another test at least here, right?
Yeah.
He's not at the end of his rope, even though his numbers look bad. He looks very promising.
But ever since he has come to the top of the West Indian order, I think their opening partnerships at least look like having a semblance of decency to it. Because previously West Indies, I remember like 2014-15, they had a lot of walking wickets as openers. So
right.
And it was a rotating, revolving door kind of a situation where anyone would walk in to open. It was pretty bad. So I think Campbell at least looks a decent bat.
Yeah. No, he has the technique and the stomach, I'm sure. It's, I think, the short selection that lets him down, possibly. Yeah. And he's a lefty. Yeah. So in this entire lineup, there are not many left-handers. In fact, there is nobody except him.
Nobody.
So that's one thing, Nkrumah Bonner is one of the incumbents, let's say, if Hope were to be dropped. And he's had a very positive season as well for Jamaica, what I was reading. So this might make a very good addition to this team, right? But anyway, coming back here, Hope again let himself down. It was a good ball, no doubt. It was one that kept a bit low as well. But I expect he was playing, he was looking positive. Somehow he lost it again. Rather, it was worked out. I thought Vokes bowled really well to get him out. But then the key wicket was there, right there, Roston Chase, what you said, right? We know Brooks and Blackwood can add power, but somebody like Chase is the one who will take one end up for the rest of the day and
And he has done it in the past. Yeah. He has saved test matches and almost saved test matches in the past.
Yes. Oh God, why did he do that test match?
And also saved a test against India.
131 not out. Yeah. Crazy. But he has 2 fourth innings 100. That's better than some very big names I can take right now. But in any case, the point is, I was looking up that he might do it again. Look, all of those wickets were Broad again, right? I think Broad has come good with his words as much as his games on the field. This is the quality of a leader. I think somebody who wants to lead the attack must be able to do this. You say, why did you drop me? And then you come back and take 6 or 8 wickets and lead the game.
Instead of brooding and failing.
Exactly. That's very good. But then again, what was very heartening, before the second session began, I read a stat on Cricinfo, right? In the first test, we had forgotten they were 35 for 3 as well.
Yes.
So here they were 27 for 3 or 29 for 3 or something. So there was not a lot between that. But then that critical blow, right? Losing Roston Chase immediately after the break was probably what cost them. One of the things that cost them. The other one, what you were highlighting to me off air, losing Blackwood of the last ball of the middle set.
Yeah. Right? Yes. Because going in with 6 in hand and 2 set batsmen, a 100-run partnership is completely different, right? Even if that had like played out, they had played out another 5 overs after tea, it makes a huge difference there.
See, you got your 60 balls or 35 from Jason Holder. Unfortunately,
Yes.
Dowrich had a pair. He was one of my unsung heroes as far as the first test match goes. Unfortunately, he had a bad test, same like Shannon Gabriel, which was sort of unexpected, but it happened. But then the writing was pretty much on the wall. The moment the partnership of Brooks and Holder was broken, I was more or less certain this is it, because there was more than an hour and a quarter of play, possible play left. I thought that was too
Yes.
much. That required a little bit of a miracle, and unfortunately, that's what unfolded. West Indies were 198 all out, and I think the wickets are pretty much, spread in between the bowlers. And I was happy to see Dom West come to the party as well.
Yeah.
You know,
So Dombes is an improved bowler, like much improved. Like I remember seeing him against Pakistan a few years ago, and he looked nothing more than a containing bowler.
Right.
Now he seems to have like a lot more going for him. He's getting the ball to grip, and that Holder's dismissal especially was like a perfect off spinner's dismissal.
beautiful loop and gone through the gate, right?
Gate.
So that was good. And then, of course, this guy is never showing up on many people's radar, Sam Curran. He does something,
Yes.
right?
17 test matches, I think he has won 13 of them.
Ah.
Whenever England has played him, and he doesn't get to play a full series generally. So
And
he has this Chaminda was like wicket taking ability with the ball.
yeah.
Very much vast, and even also with the bat. Right? Vas also had this
Little bit of a sting,
ability with the bat.
right?
Yeah.
I think he made a mockery of India when they toured, but against other teams, he's still able to hold up.
In fact, during India's tour, he was the difference between the two sides. I would just go as far to say that. I don't think there was anything to choose from between their top orders or the bowling attacks, except for Sam Curran.
Right.
Yeah, that sting in the tail is what made us lose test matches.
Correct.
Yeah.
Agree. No, but again, look, he's back, and Joe Root is back, and you immediately see there's a difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That was pretty weird. But anyway, also the positive, I think the captaincy of Joe Root had a lot to do. The field positions were a lot more, attacking, especially when Broadwood bowling with his tail up. That was very nice to see. So all in all, for me, this is a fantastic advertisement again with Test match going forward. The way sport has made a comeback in cricket at the highest level, this is fantastic.
So couldn't have thought of a better series, like the way it is poised right now. Couldn't have thought of two better test matches to start it off.
Agreed.
Like you have gone like two last session test matches. I think you can't ask for more.
Indeed. That was very good. And yeah, I mean, that means the series is 1-1, but I have a feeling from here England will run away.
Yeah,
West Indies will compete, but England will somehow take the series 2-1. You think the
same. I don't think West Indies have the reserves currently, in the sense that I don't think Gabriel can last another test match, or Roach might turn up. So that's one positive for them, is that Roach hasn't fired yet. Okay. So probably he might have one spell in him, but I really do not see both Alzari Joseph and Gabriel lasting physically through the final test. So I hope that they have an Ocean Thomas, or
they have an Ocean Thomas,
or Chemar Holder replacing one of these two.
Exactly.
So potentially.
But then also, what about we say Hope will be replaced by Warner? Probably that's a given.
Probably.
Do you see any other change?
I don't see any other thing actually. Otherwise, probably say you can have a spinner in.
Yeah.
Because the kind of damage that Chase has been doing, probably they might benefit from another spinner. Probably a one seamer light, and given that the next test match again will be at Old Trafford, if the wicket plays anything like this, probably they could do with another spinner in the 11.
I would say if it's at all possible, maybe drop both Alzari Joseph and Shannon Gabriel. Bring Ocean Thomas for a bit of power.
Yeah.
And bring in the spinner.
Rakeem Cornwall also gives them batting depth if they have Cornwall. Yeah.
Yeah, he bats at 8. He's a definite 8,
Hmm.
right? That means there's a bit more to add. So it might not be a bad thing. Somehow, Alzari Joseph, I expected him to do a bit more.
Alzari has been bowling well, so I haven't seen him bowl better. But I think again, fitness is an issue. He's young,
Right?
and West Indies probably do not have the. To be fair to them,
Mm.
they probably do not have the kind of academies and fitness training that some of the big three have.
Mm.
So that's that's huge, right? In a back-to-back Test match series like this,
Right.
that plays a huge role. Lasting two Test matches within and you have less than 3 days between two Test matches. I think it's really for a 22-year-old. It may not be the easiest thing in the world. Alzari otherwise has impressed me a lot, both Test matches. He is the one who turned around the previous Test actually with the ball, and probably Cornwall for Alzari and Thomas for Gabriel would be two changes I'd make.
Okay. Yeah, that seems reasonable. So for England, any changes? I don't see any change. But how about you?
I don't see any. Probably you might see Anderson walk back in.
For Vokes?
It's really hard. It has to be for Vokes. They don't have a choice because they can't drop Karan anymore. So,
Correct.
but otherwise, I don't see any reason for them to change this actually.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. But all in all I'm looking forward to is another cracker of a test, which will start very soon. Also, something that I'm very happy about.
Happy about, yeah.
And right on the horizon, you have Pakistan already training. Right?
Pakistan
That's
also.
perfect. So, at least as fans of cricket and mainly test cricket, we are all very happy.
Couple of months are sorted for us. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's what we were thinking. Now, if we were to move on to the other big topic, World Cup T20 has been postponed, right?
Which was kind of inevitable in many ways. It took so long surprises me actually. I was expecting this to come out like much earlier because the Australian government has basically ruled out even international flights for another 6 months. So
Right.
I couldn't see how they were to fly in 16 teams within 3 months and manage that. And also, to be really honest, I don't want to see a World Cup behind closed doors.
Exactly.
So imagine and I am also talking about that from the perspective of some of the smaller sites like Papua New Guinea getting their first shot at a big tournament experience. Would really like to play it in front of crowds, and PNG has big cricket culture, which we tend to. They might even have traveling fans and stuff in Australia, native PNG fans in Australia. So why would they want to play in front of empty houses, given their first shot? Look at how Thailand played in the Women's World T20, right? Earlier this year. Those are the sides I actually look forward to in big events, and they should all have a shot at playing in front of crowds.
Indeed. Yeah, and I really hope, when they get to go in front of the world stage, they get a full crowd. 80,000 people cheering for them. That will be very good indeed.
In World T20s, it tends to happen also because they usually have double headers. So they usually have like one big game and another less marquee game. So that ends up getting you crowds for both the games. So I'm really hoping all these sides get to play that instead of like a watered down version of a World Cup.
Indeed. When it comes to, the elephant in the room, how much of an impact did BCCI/Indian Cricket Administration have on this decision? It appears to be a very important one.
Yes, I am generally not very kind to the BCCI, but I think this one probably was not BCCI.
Right.
I think the pandemic would have dictated. The Australian government, especially the Victoria government, had already said that you can't even have a Boxing Day test this year the same way. So
correct. We discussed this in our previous episode as well. But yeah, I mean, look, it's rather to have a proper full-fledged World Cup once we are able to recover a bit.
But there is also another interesting ramification of this. The ODI World Cup has been pushed back by 6 months.
Correct.
So what was supposed to be the summer of 2023 is now going to be the Diwali Dasara wala season of the same year.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, but okay. I mean, some rain may get in the way, but I think it will be still fine in India. We can still play that. Because it's in India, right? So
that will be start of the season. So it will be actually probably better in some ways.
Yeah, there are 3 windows they are suggesting, but somehow I still think it will be. I think it will be in 2022, right? October, November of 2022. 2021 will still be the one where India will host it, I guess.
So what they are contemplating right now is if India hosts the World T20 in 2022, then you will have like 2 world tournaments back to back in the same country.
Exactly.
which meant public appetite may not be the same for two world events. So,
In India, I think it'll be fine, but still,
but neutral venue games and crowds, that might be a bit of a problem if you have two events back to back. So they might probably shuffle it around. You might have like 2021 going to India and then Australia and back. So might be
let's see.
in the first place, India shouldn't have been hosting the World T20 in 2022. It should have been some other country. That's for another day.
Indeed, indeed. So I have such an objection myself, but yeah, if we go into that, it'll take a rabbit hole. But look, coming on to some of the other topics, your favorite, 3TC,
Oh,
three-team cricket, right?
yeah.
So AB de Villiers' Eagles have taken gold. It was a one-off. It was an exhibition game. It was held on Mandela's birthday, 18th July. I think you're not a big fan, you said.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan primarily because I think the purpose of it is to attract, I'm guessing, newer audiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to introduce the newest audience to the most obscure form of the game and then expect them to go all the way up, or is it going to just be a format which is just for that 1 month of one to a couple of weeks, just for the sake of it? Like, what is the purpose of it? Because I think as a sport, we do not want to branch out so much that we end up confusing the audience. Because casual audiences, you need at least something which resembles the pinnacle of the sport, right? So if I'm watching football, whether casual or not, I want something which looks like probably the football World Cup would look like. What is the aspirationally or a big club tournament would look like? Why? I don't see the purpose of it basically. So what does it offer that say a T20 tournament wouldn't offer?
Look, for me, the breaks in play, that is sort of more conducive to shorter attention spans that we usually expect from our audiences. Point number one. Point number two, when you look at how it is structured, the end goal of a limited overs game is actually not broken in as much that
More runs.
the team that scores the highest wins. That is still intact, right? There are some nitty-gritty rules. We know who bats first, once in the second leg or third leg. Those are all. There are some jumbled up rules. I agree. And what happens when somebody is run out? There is a chance of a one guy batting, which can't happen in any other format. So I agree. But for me, this is still one different way of trying something. I'm not going to say this is the best way. For me, when I look at its competitor like 100, this is more easy to understand compared to 100
Okay.
for a newcomer. This is my thought process.
Even I had reservations even with the 100. They might all end up being successful. I might be the dinosaur in the room, so it's okay. But my real problem with the purpose I see of all these newer formats is to globalize the sport and introduce it to more audiences. That I see is the
Right.
to go outside of your Test cricket core audience or the one day cricket audience. But my problem is that in the first place, the reason a lot of people probably do not take up to the sport is they feel the rules are too hard to follow, or the laws of this game are really archaic and very difficult to keep track of. By introducing multiple different formats, I'm not making it easy for them to transition between different formats. That's probably my argument. Like, that is what. So a scaled down version, probably a 2020 to 1010, I still see that okay, nothing much changes. It's just a scaled. It's like playing a 20-minute football match instead of 45 a half. So that is something I have reservations with. I remember like you had this Supermax tournament, like a game, right, which Martin Crowe had introduced, where you had like
Yeah. Precursor to
T20.
Yeah.
Then India actually toured in 2002, I think, where we played one game of that kind. So a lot of them have come and gone. So let us see how this goes. But I think as a sport, our focus should be on like consolidating our other conventional formats. The T20 is here to stay. We all know that now, and it can easily be globalized. So instead of going in multiple directions, we should look at making the international cricket playing field more democratic, where you introduce more teams. Now I think T20 is ready for a 20-team World Cup potentially.
Yeah. I mean, it has been already.
Yeah.
Look, at least the first move, at the fringes, the rules are being sort of loosened.
Loosened.
Every T20 ever played
Is
going to be
international.
never
Yeah.
is an international. So they're trying to make it more open. You can keep the elite to Test cricket.
Yeah.
You can open out T20s. I say even if possible for ICC to embrace one of these newfangled formats,
Yeah.
T10 or
Yeah.
TTC
Yeah.
or 100, whatever, and then allow it to grow as one of the other
And
branches. Right?
one of my
I agree.
pet peeves is also the way Olympics, for example. If the one of the major reservations with cricket not being in the Olympics, even if the Olympic Association wants it to be, is
Yeah.
that the ICC doesn't want a competing tournament which is not under its purview to be competing with the World T20. So
Agreed.
why not make the Olympics an associate only event? Like,
Correct.
let the test playing nations not play the Olympics. Keep
Now you can send a B team
B
or
team
an under
because the Olympics at the heart of it is supposed to be an amateur sporting event. It's not supposed to be a professional sportsman's pinnacle. So
Actually, yes.
why,
Yeah.
which is also controversial. Why is football exists in the Olympics? Because the Olympic gold medal isn't the pinnacle of football. The football World Cup is. So which is why football Olympic event is actually an under 21 event, mostly under 23 events. They don't
Correct.
really allow the senior teams completely to participate.
And make a similar rule. Also
Make
for,
a similar rule for the international cricket game. So make it a T20 event, but to distinguish it from the World T20, keep it predominantly for the associate nations and under 21 sides or something like that. But these are the areas where cricket has to put really a thought into, and this is where we are more reactive, and we are I think ages behind other sports with these calls.
Indeed.
Yeah.
No, plenty to learn there. I'm sure there's plenty to learn. But you know what? It's fine. If cricket is somehow finding a way to survive, in spite of all the elite and all that, you should keep Test cricket pure. You should keep it what it is, between 15 max number of people, number of countries. It's good. And these other sports, it can be embraced. 3TC is one of those. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 210. We don't know. Right?
We don't
but
know.
It's
worth a try.
Forward.
Worth a try, and given the state where the game is in a state of pause anyway, so it's a good time to try it also. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, look, when we discussed the test matches between England and West Indies, we forgot one thing: a certain Jofra Archer and what he did.
Yeah.
We totally forgot about it.
He risked $1 billion industry based on all the money that was put into hosting this series could have all gone down the drain. Like, had he done anything, like had he affected a few people, and with his stupidity, could have basically gone down the drain.
Look, it still shows even elite sportsmen need to be treated like cattle. They need to be carried around like buses. Best that way.
Both Djokovic and Archer have shown that.
Right. But okay, I mean, that's a lesson learned, I'm sure, going forward. And it was sporting of the West Indian Cricket Board to not say, one of your guys have broken the protocol, let's stop the series. Because they would have taken it one way, right? That's well done.
The West Indies have actually taken a lot of pain to make this happen, right? They are the country which are less affected from the whole COVID situation, least affected. And for them to fly down a team and almost a full team, I think kudos to them. And probably had it been the other way around, would the English side have travelled? I have reservations.
Agree.
Probably they would.
I would have been curious what would have happened if a country like India or Pakistan or even South Africa, one of these countries were actually the opposition team. It would have been a very curious situation, I think.
Curious situation, yeah.
Indeed. Now, going a little bit far afield, Australia have selected a 26-man preliminary squad, right? So this is in hopes that there will be a limited overs series again.
7-match one-day series, like the kind I hate actually. But yeah.
Why not play 2 tests? Somebody can tell them, right? But anyway.
Or like, I don't understand, like, before I get to that, I'd much rather prefer tours to be full, so that side doesn't fly back to this country again for another 3 years. That gives you a sense of structure to a tour, right? When a one-day series when a tour would start off with a one-day series followed by tests, there used to be a lot of context to that one-day series where like players and individual battles would build, and then you would see it culminating in the test series. When you split tours this way, where Australia is touring India for 3 one-days in the start of January, which is outside of the test tour, it really somehow it lacks context. That's my problem.
Yeah, this is completely contextless. It's more like a pure, agreement.
Yeah.
We had agreed we'll play, let's complete it.
Yeah.
I always say both these countries play day-night tests.
Mm.
It's a bit cold, but if you
Yeah.
can play one day, you can play a day-night test. Instead of 7 ODIs, why you not play 2 tests, call it a mini Ashes or
match.
something.
Yeah, or a full all day night test series.
Exactly.
Yeah, as fans of the game, we'll watch it, but I'm just talking of like it doesn't really make sense for the sport. Like for the larger good of the game, probably the kind of tours we had earlier, the one day series had more charm to it because it was part of like this bigger tour. Like even that Sharjah Desert Storm being the culmination of a long tour where India and Australia battled over multiple months. So it culminated with that Sachin.
Yeah.
That Sachin versus Vaughan was the highlight of that summer for us.
Correct.
So say Stokes versus Bumrah, for example, over a long tour makes a lot more difference than just traveling for like 3 games in the middle of the summer and nothing on either side of it. That's so 26-man squad is like, I think it's the new normal in cricket is going to be like 30-man squads in
30 people. Yeah. Like you always keep double your squad and then some, just in case, right? I mean, there are some new people here. There is Daniel Sams, Riley Meredith, and Josh Philippi. All of these are names which are not uncommon if you have been looking at BBL over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah. On and off. Yeah, I have heard these names. Yeah.
Indeed. But then some old, let's say some old favorites like you have your Marcus Stoinis, you have of course Maxwell. You have also Usman Khawaja. All of these people are back in the squad as well.
Yeah.
So it's an expanded squad. Not everybody play a game for sure, but it's given that it's a 7-match game. If the result is fair,
it's the same probably for England in the series preceding that. I think they have a one-day series against Ireland, which has a 25-man squad.
Yeah. Same for Pakistan and Ireland, I think. Yeah, you're right. So, but that's good. That's all good because this is going to be the new normal. What you said going ahead, it will not be 15-man squads anymore, right?
And now sides have much longer to plan for the World Cup also now. So 50-over World Cup now. Teams might have to now rethink. Actually, given that the World Cup is almost a year away now, they push back a year. Teams might have to rethink what's going to be their top order because a lot of players can lose form. What one-day sides look today may not really be the shape that they take before that World Cup. So this is going to be a much larger story that will emerge in the next couple of years. What happens to one-day sides, given that the World Cup is going to be sandwiched between 2 T20 World Cups? Is one-day cricket going to look more like T20 by the time that T20 sides are going to just transition into the one-day team? There's a lot that is to be looked forward to.
Well, I think the one-day will sort of be still a cautious mix of T20 plus tests.
But the way England took to one-day cricket in this previous World Cup cycle is that they looked at it as an expanded T20.
50-over T20.
Yeah,
indeed, or 50,
2 T20s kind of. So it's interesting whether that is how the game will evolve. So these are things to look forward to. Yeah.
Let's see. But I mean, by the time the next World Cup cycle comes around, it's going to be held in India.
Yeah.
The game might look completely different.
Very different. Yeah.
Going forward, well, at least Mohammad Amir is again free to join the Pakistan squad, at least for the limited overs. Like he's had the birth of his second child, so I think he's now ready. But we hear he has to be tested twice and pass both unsuccessfully. Only then he's able to come through. But we wish him all the best, and I'm sure Pakistan will be stronger.
And they also have a while to go before their one-day leg begins, so there is still time for them. Yeah.
For example, you Shoaib Malik, right? So he was allowed to spend some time with his family in UAE.
Yeah.
And then he's then going to go. So let's see how that goes. And when we look at some of the news from outside of the cricketing field, the United States of America has now again said they'll not be offering contracts to their players but just monthly retainers. Did you happen to see it?
Mm-hmm. So did they have? No, I did not. So did they have like annual contracts before, or
they had 13 national contracted players.
It's interesting. So again, coming back to the health of the associate game, this is something I see now with a lot of associate teams. They have a reasonably professional setup now with annual contracts and stuff. So that's heartening in a way.
But somehow this has gone the other way.
It's gone the other way.
Retainers.
Yeah.
and retainers are no way close to what monthly contracts used to offer, for example, in terms of remuneration. But also, not all 13 players will be contracted. Who are contracted will be offered retainers.
So I
Probably like
have
8 or
not
7.
kept in touch. So has it got to do with the COVID situation and the financial health and stuff like that? What's the official reasoning for this?
Basically, it's just they, at least the CEO says, they see a lot of uncertainty with respect to the domestic, international, and global cricket economy and future revenues. They're not sure. It's a very complicated way of saying we don't have money, I think.
They were actually in Willow TV and I think Times of India were investing in a T20 league in the US, if I'm not wrong, which probably would have taken off next year. But I don't know, given the current scenario, I think a lot of the smaller leagues, say even the European T20 league, for example, which looked promising,
Right.
these might take a lot of hit.
Oh man, I was hoping to go see a few of those or cover a few of those live. Anyway, that's gone. Now, going further, a couple of BCCI related news. Your favorite topic, I'm sure. Right? So one, BCCI's apex body, which met on 17th, basically they got more or less they predicted that they have date window September 26th to November 9th, most likely in UAE, given the cases that are happening in India with COVID. This is the IPL 2020. So it's more or less certain now, barring some inking on the paper, that UAE will host IPL 2020. It will be almost a full format tournament starting September 26th, ending 9th, and so on. So yeah, what do you think of this? So again, we'll have to quietly marry the other topic. Did IPL cause a displacement of the World Cup and the Asia Cup at all?
Asia Cup for sure. Probably not the World Cup.
Right.
Because the Asia Cup would have happened in UAE or Sri Lanka probably, but definitely probably in the UAE given the current geopolitical situation.
Yeah.
So Asia Cup it has definitely eaten into, and Asia Cup is again a tournament which I enjoy. Like it's a guilty pleasure of mine.
Correct.
It's one tournament outside of the ICC events that I look forward to. Because the Asia Cup also has new sides and stuff like that. But I think that has the BCCI has definitely eaten into. But there is also this sense of inevitability around September, October being this window, and given the current COVID situation in India, there is no way it would have happened in India in any case. So, but the UAE, okay, good for us. So we'll have a full IPL to look forward to.
Well, I mean, I just have to find out which time of the day it is that I tune out of all the news, probably on Twitter and so on. So for me, it's the same until the last 5 games. I am a fan of IPL, but
yeah,
I only watch the ebbs and flows from afar until the last.
So the way I consume IPL is I don't have a team to follow anymore.
Okay.
So I used to till you had the older guys playing, but since then I have certain rules. Like I genuinely do not have a team to follow. I pick a side on a particular day which has the better pace bowling lineup or a younger batting lineup, so something like that. Right. I have like a game by game basis, and I eventually only tune into the whole hype of it towards the fag end of the tournament.
Pretty much the same for me. Like last 5-6 games, and yeah, I'm happy with that.
But this year, given COVID and all the other lack of entertainment options, I think I might watch more of the IPL this year.
I'm going to try and not watch it.
Dubai might not be the most conducive place for exciting tournaments. That's the sad part.
You mean from the pitch?
Slower wickets. Yeah.
Oh well.
You might have like 140, 150 games probably.
Let's see.
It will be much more spin friendly than India.
How do I put it mildly? Even if you play it on a dead pitch in Dubai, somehow RCB will find a way to lead 200 runs. I'm going to wait for this, right? If I were to have a city-based affiliation, that would have been my team. But somehow this generation, I don't expect they'll win anything. I think Kumble's RCB came closest to winning.
Yeah, the second year.
And Kohli's RCB went into a final, but somehow they didn't look like they were going to win that. But anyway.
And lost to Hyderabad on both times. Different versions of Hyderabad. So
exactly. Yeah, that's a good point.
One thing to notice would be one thing which would be interesting is that sides might have picked squads based on the tournament being played in India, right? So some sides might end up benefiting from this move to Dubai because Indian pitches, for example, these days Kolkata, Dharamshala, wickets like these, and even Jaipur on odd occasion, Mumbai are all much more bouncier and they have pace. Uh, these days, they are some of them even are like ranked green top sometimes. So
Correct.
I don't see that happening in Dubai in any case. So certain sides which had like good pace attacks, say Kolkata would have picked the squad based on them playing 7 games in Eden. So some
Right.
sides might end up benefiting from this, I guess.
Now, this is where your coaching skill, your management skill with the squad will come through. Whichever side can manage a better squad also will probably have a better chance. Look, each squad has enough spinners. I think it's going to be a spinners
Yeah, tournament.
dominated
Yeah,
IPL,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Let's see how that goes. But you mentioned a good team for us to continue our next topic, right? Hyderabad.
Yeah.
So, did you see that BCCI has been ordered to pay 4,800
Yeah.
crores? I have to pause to think how many zeros are in that. Doesn't matter which currency, rupees, right? Still, 4,800 crores is the amount that they have been ordered to pay by an arbitration committee. Did you see that? Good God.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hmm.
But is it going to materialize? That's the interesting.
That's a good question. Wait. That's a different question. We will handle that next.
That looks like an astronomical sum. So I just was taken aback.
And I mean, that might even bankrupt the BCCI, if I may say, right? That's
Yeah, yeah.
But this is a very serious case because the amount of money that they required as bank guarantees. You see some numbers here. 4,000 crores is the amount that would have been accrued if the Deccan Chargers would have held it, and plus what they owe their creditors, plus what the franchisee dues, etc. They required 100 crore bank guarantee in 10 days, BCCI, for them to even hold any.
Yeah.
So when I look at those numbers, this is agreed it's a huge number, but seems like a reasonable settlement from the overall picture
Yeah.
perspective. It's an unlawful termination of an entire, consortium, right? So,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
And somehow another name, another old friend of ours, Mr. Lalit Modi, his name has come up again. If you
Come
saw
up
it,
again.
right? Apparently, it was under
Yeah.
tenure, right? It happened in 2010 and 2012.
Yeah, which is like the murky IPL era, basically.
Right. The big glasses and mustache. No, that's it. So we'll have to see how this will end up.
So is it still astronomical for the BCCI? Is something
Yes.
I was thinking. Yeah, it probably is not,
Yes.
but it's also an ego issue, right? So
No, for no doubt about the ego issue. Look, it will not break them. They will not go into receivership just because of this. But it will really hurt them.
yeah, financially probably they might even make up in another year because
No. Not 4,800 crores. That's too big a number.
not 4,800 crore.
Look, it will probably, nobody knows how deep BCCI's coffers are, right? This is a non-profit
That's true.
organization registered in Chennai that doesn't pay taxes,
Hmm.
right? So
That-
with that in mind, nobody knows how deep their pockets are. But still,
This will eat into their pockets.
it will probably hurt them, and we'll
Yeah.
see how it goes. And I don't think they'll anyway pay all of it. They'll contest it, get it those. But he'll still make sure, as you say.
It's an ego issue for them more than anything
exactly.
else. Because given how so I was originally hopeful of Ganguly becoming the president and so on, but eventually we have seen what has happened over the course of the last year. They have tried to dilute everything that was even positive with the Lodha reforms.
Exactly. Look at how many people have quit since. Rahul Johari quit, Sabha
Yes,
Karim quit,
yes.
Ragnekar quit, everybody quit. Shantarajan Swami has to leave.
Has to
CAG
leave.
has asked to be excused.
So-
So it's slowly the inertia of the system, the inertia of the organization.
And also the way they have tried to say find loopholes in that Lodha reforms by say if a politician cannot directly be associated, then you will have the next in line somewhere, some indirect way a politician is associated. Nepotism.
His son, his brother.
Jay Shah, Dhumal, then you have Srinivasan's daughter probably associated with Tamil Nadu. So this is not how I thought this tenure would go.
Correct. Exactly.
So I was more hopeful when Ganguly took over, but it more and more looks like Ganguly is just a conduit for them to show a cricketing face to the BCCI, whereas the rest of the matters keep going the way it always were.
There are two things I think about this. One, he needs a bit of time to consolidate himself. And he did not start with a clean sheet. It was already a very blotched sheet.
Yeah.
So it will take him some time to turn over a new side of that sheet, right? There is already too much on that sheet. So that's one thing. The other thing, you heard it here before probably, or you heard it here for the first time. I don't know. The thing is, he might be earmarked for bigger things on the national stage, or at least in his own
National
state,
stage.
right? Because that was one of the things I keep discussing with somebody I know, one of the other cricket fans we talk about it. He says, no, Ganguly will be probably pulled into politics of the mainstream.
Probably.
This is just a stopover for him for another 3 years or 2 years. The moment he turns 45, 48, 50, they're going to just pull him into the bigger picture, where they need a face in West Bengal and so on. So
Bengal politics.
it's a longer discussion and not one for a
Cricket.
cricketing podcast. But nonetheless, there is more to be had here. And if you want really some changes to be seen, Ganguly needs to be given a little bit of time. This nepotism that you see so deep rooted, it cannot be rooted out in, I dare say, one entire term. And he didn't even have a term.
But say conflict of interest, for example. So I was really disappointed with the way they reacted to it. You could have at least tried to address it in a more dignified sense, but what you end up having is like Ganguly as the BCCI president is now endorsing Dream 11.
Yeah.
It's on your face, right? That is not something I want to see.
That should have been pulled. Pulled. Yeah.
So that's an issue, but that's probably for another podcast.
Also, the way they're trying to get it extended.
Yeah, they are trying to get extended.
Those that are in power are not. Only when you're coming for re-election is the case. So that means you're again exempt until you're full term and good God. And the people they consult are ex-chief justices as well.
Yeah. And the
Right?
ex-chief justices, these are issues they feel are much more, apart from all the other things that are going around in the country, these are the things
Right.
they feel are more important to meddle with. So, yeah.
Hey, look, if you're an ex-chief justice, you know how the system works and you know every loophole there ever was. Only thing is, if somebody is willing to pay you for half an hour of your consultation, why would you say anything? Come on, that's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's one thing. Moving on a bit, BCCI's sphere of influence. The Indian Cricketers Association that has sort of started is trying to, should be an association that you can expect to stand up against BCCI from a player perspective, for example.
But it's also a caged parrot, right? The way it is.
No, that's exactly the point. At least the president, Mr. Ashok Malhotra, says he did not get the sort of support he was looking for from some people like Anshuman Gaikwad or Shantarangaswamy. Basically, all their entire caucus is purely BCCI controlled still.
Which actually goes against the purpose of having a cricketers association in the first place. So,
Right. It's again, look, we have a cricketers association, but then listen to what we have to say. Right? Then what's the point?
Yeah.
If in places like Australia and England, this is an almost independent body which the players have a saying in as much that they have legal representation through that and they're able to challenge some of the decisions. For example, in Australia, they got the revenue system modified a little, right, to suit the players a bit more.
and the players stand up actually to the boards.
Here, the individual player, probably the top 15 players of India, earn so much they don't give a whatever.
They'll never speak up.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
everything you earn is sort of controlled by that you don't have to speak up. Right?
Yeah.
That in case, as long as that's how it is controlled, it's always going to be this way. But it's a longer discussion, but again, another small gripe.
And structurally it is a lot more like disastrous for the game in the country, because you'll have like the cream at the top looking good, but the people lower down have no voices basically in the sport. So it's also a longer social discussion. So like
another we can do a sub podcast where we go into a bit of the social and the political ramifications of what we just discussed. I wouldn't mind doing that, right? But not maybe this episode.
Yeah.
So going further from one world body to another, or one cricketing body to another, you have Indra Nooyi, who's one of the people on board the ICC. So if somebody were to vote her as the next president or chairperson, would you think that would work?
I am actually quite interested in that as an idea. Probably she has the experience of running something like a global enterprise like Pepsi.
Correct.
And cricket at this moment needs someone with a global outlook. It's a commodity that needs to go out. I think very easily as a sport, especially the shorter formats, can be taken to many more countries if the ICC itself is willing to take short-term losses. The game can make a lot more money, which we tend to lose sight of when the ICC goes for a 10-team World Cup and shrinks it from 16 and 14 to 10.
Right.
why we do it is because in the short term probably they look at it as being more lucrative because it will give you more top 8 games.
Right.
But probably if you were to take this punch for a financial punch for a couple more tournaments like in one cycle, and you have say 2 good teams emerging out of it, you untap a market which will bring in much more money right now currently, which the ICC is unwilling to take up basically. And probably hopefully someone who has run say a much bigger global enterprise, if that thought process can be brought into the sport, I'm all for it, because I at least at that level you don't need to know the sport per se. It's more your managerial skills and how you look at these commodities is what matters.
Therein lies a small problem for me. Can you still get a handle on the top 3 or the big 3? If you cannot, they will not allow you to make these sort of decisions where, revenue might take a small backseat to popularizing the game or something. Can they do it? Sort of Shashank Manohar, I don't know if you saw it recently. Srinivasan said appointment of Shashank Manohar was the most disastrous thing for Indian cricket. Right? You can't always have somebody who sort of favors you sitting right at the top, because this person is supposed to look at the entire game, not just you and your pockets. Right? So in this case, would something like that work, do you think?
Probably not. In a utopian world, it might end up being what we saw with Ganguly, basically. So it might go down that route. But ICC has to be the most blind sporting organization in the world. Given there are things that align for that sport, but the administrative body itself is not interested in globalizing it. Say last 3 years, if you were to take and look at the health of associate cricket. So you had in this previous 5-6 year cycle, you have had Netherlands beating England twice in an ICC World T20.
Correct.
It is a sign of the sport being in decent health. Then you've had like newer teams suddenly emerging. Afghanistan's miraculous rise. You've had Ireland beating England in World Cups and beating West Indies and Pakistan in World Cups. So the global, say, outlook of the game should have been much stronger going ahead. What we did in response to that was to shrink the tournament. So I don't see
that was the weirdest move.
As opposed to say rugby embracing Japan and all these sides, and rugby has taken the gamble of going towards the 24-30 team World Cup. T20 cricket can surely do that, but the problem is you had Scotland beating England a year before the One Day World Cup. Do people even remember that? Nobody does.
No.
Like 1 year before the World Cup, Scotland scored like 380 against England and beat an English World Cup winning side a year before. But we don't even consider them good enough to get say consistent one day games. The governing body can't even take a decision which mandates you to play all teams equally. That's the least a governing body should do for globalizing. So that global vision the body itself doesn't have, as opposed to other sports. So I think that's the biggest hurdle for the globalization of cricket, is the cricket administration itself, not the sport or how hard it is to grasp. I think that's the least of the issues. People will embrace it.
Look, I mean, somebody neutral would be the best. Somebody who doesn't have the
baggage,
let's say the betterment of one, or baggage even, right? But the game itself is, as we said about BCCI, unfortunately, let's say the nepotism is not the word I will use. The self-serving nature of certain members are so deep rooted. It's very tough, because they are also the controlling interests when it comes to finances.
Correct.
Today, BCCI cannot be challenged because they can form their own ICC. That's the whole point, right? So when you have such imbalance in powers, it's never a body. There are no equals there. It's pretty obvious, right? And this was the case in the 70s with some of the other countries.
With England and Australia at that point.
Exactly. So this will never be addressed in cricket unless we bring enough participants where there are certain amount of equality achieved on and off the field. But this is again a lot.
Because every decision, even the one we discussed before about the Olympics, is serving only the top 3. If you were to do just take a vote on whether cricket has to be in the Olympics or not, and exclude the top 3 and let the rest vote independently, you would see them voting unanimously in favor of the Olympics, right? it's quite obvious.
Clear.
Why would a Netherlands or say a Belgium T20 side not want to be a part of the Olympics? They would, right?
Correct. Now it's only the really big earners that will stop it. But then there are ways around it. We even went through those.
Yeah.
But all in all, I would really like to see somebody like Miss Indra Nooyi on top of the
Yeah.
ICC, board. But we'll see if that's
With no cricketing baggage.
yes. Okay. No cricketing baggage. Since she's been a part of the board probably already a few
Yeah.
years, and she knows how the machinations happen. It would take somebody like that who knows the inner working of the council, but still has an open mind to cut it out.
Yeah.
That's what I think Shashank Manohar did for a large extent.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who says what he did is good or bad. I appreciate him for
Exactly.
sort of taking the control away from the big three,
Big three.
sort of offering more money to the
Yeah.
associates. He did a lot of good things. But let's see if this is going to come to pass. I somehow think it's, Jais Clark's turn this time, they say. It's somehow just going to be him.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have finished all the discussion topics. It was a wonderful, wonderful chat. But before we close, we have the trivia section, right?
Yep.
So the trivia question from the previous episode was, when was the first Boxing Day test held at the MCG? So would you know, what would you like to take a guess, Maria?
I will take a guess. So it's probably sometime in the late 70s, I would say.
Not very far off.
Late, I think 79, 81, somewhere in this phase, I would say.
Good guess, but I think you're off by 3
Okay.
Ashes. So it was 74, 75
Oh,
Ashes.
okay.
And so it was the third test of the 74, 75 Ashes where they decided to do it as a nice thing to do. Let's see what will happen. And then it stuck on as a tradition.
What we think of as a timeless tradition is actually only quite recent in that sense.
Well, 50 years is a long time in sport, considering cricket's history.
Given how old the sport is, not that old. Yeah.
Indeed. It's not so timeless as a test in Lords or something. Agreed. Totally agreed.
Yeah.
Right? So the trivia question from this episode is, we saw some terrible umpiring. I'm sorry to say that. Lot of horrible umpiring this series. But
Just before you move on to the question, just a tangent. Do you think a lot of it was because of the third review, the umpires were actually more trigger happy with the LBWs?
yeah, it could be. But for me, it's mostly about rustiness, I think.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of rustiness also for the umpires. See, a
Umpires
player
to be
can do a
rusty.
nets. How can you do a nets? Being an umpire, you can watch a net. Right?
Yeah.
Or you actually stand in nets and give out when people are practicing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just thinking, right? So it could be that, but also there may be. See, I think this is a very crucial time for umpires because, for example, in the second test, I think no bowling duties were taken over by the third umpire entirely.
Yeah.
So when these things happen, I think they are going to now find their niche again. Somehow, umpires have come to doubt themselves because everything can be reviewed at a later time. Your lack of spontaneity will be immediately spotted, and you will be sort of made to pay in one way or the other, right? They've sort of lost a little bit of confidence, but now it's going to make a comeback when they're assisted the right way through technology. This is my opinion.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Going forward, the question was, who was the first umpire whose decision was ever overturned on review? If you can name the year and the match, that's perfect. So in this case, this was based on
Which format are you talking about? Just.
I think it was the one day. I'll have to check it. I think it was
So you are referring to that specifically.
no, the first ever decision that was overturned.
Okay. First ever. Okay.
First ever. So I can give you the year. It was 2008.
Okay.
So I would like to know who was the umpire, right? So this was actually thanks to a tweet by the North Stand Gang Wankede on Twitter. So we would like to say thanks to them. This was an idea from their own tweet, right? So if you want to get in touch with us to give us an answer to the question or let us know how you think our podcast is going, please do get in touch. The ways you can get in touch are, well, we always say it every episode. It's on Twitter at armchaircrickpod, where we are also active during the tests. In mails, you can say armchair.cricket@gmail.com. You can also send in a comment on any of the podcasting apps. We have a bunch listed in our episode notes. Also, if you are using Apple Podcasts, please do subscribe and hit the like button and give us a 5-star rating. This is very important for us. So that was let's say the content. But now I would like to say thank you to Aditya. So as always, Aditya, the time flies when we are having a chat. It's always a very wonderful chat with you. We mix social, political, economical, all issues apart from cricket, but it's wonderful. For me as a cricketing fan, I always fun. So
it's great fun.
Maybe you would like to plug a bit about your own podcast.
Yeah, so So I am from the Fourth Seat podcast. So me and a couple of my other friends. So we are all 90s kids who grew up in middle class Bombay, and we discuss a lot of random stuff, nostalgia driven, a lot of obscure movie references, B grade movies, and we end up reviewing them. And if you are into ideas like that, and also a lot of very even more armchair critical version of cricket, reviews of cricket matches and tournaments. It's like a bunch of friends having a conversation over chai. That is the vibe that you will get from
Or
our
Rasna with
podcast.
Rahul.
So we, yeah, or Rasna with Rahul. So our Twitter handle is at Seat Fourth, and you can find us online. You can mail us at the Fourth Seat Podcast at gmail.com, and you can also listen to us on any of our of your favorite podcast platforms. So we will be going on air with hopefully a new season in a couple of weeks with our post-COVID return.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Now, yours is one of the more enjoyable podcasts because of the mix of topics you always bring. So I'm looking forward to that myself. So, having said all that, it's a goodbye from me and our guest Aditya. Thank you, Aditya.
Good day.
Bye bye.
You're listening to the Armchair Cricket Podcast.